streaming isn't available right now. That's incredible.
Looks like you're ready. Click here to start streaming. I'm going to go live, okay?
Okay.
Greetings, everybody. Thanks to John McCubbin, Fluffy Stone, and Raza for joining this channel as members. I indicated that the live stream topic was going to be how do we simultaneously love our fate and also pursue justice, and particularly when our fate turns out to be not as desirable as we would wish for. I would like to just talk very briefly about simultaneously loving one's fate and also pursuing justice in an unjust world. I released a short video clip that hopefully you all had enough time to watch before you joined in here. I used to have a sign hanging on my office door when I was on campus at the university. It said, "Accept adversity and ambiguity as adventure." The 6 A's. Accept adversity and ambiguity as adventure. And that's sometimes very difficult because adversity often sucks. And we tend to forget that the adversity is generally short-lived. And so is the ambiguity. And it's easy to say these words and to have this sign hanging on your door, but it's far more difficult to live happily, accept one's fate, when the adversity is happening to you. Thanks for joining the channel. Natural Progressive, the Natural Progressive / Roar Media. Well, somebody already commented. Can you hear me, Pauline?
I can't hear
Somebody already commented that their internet was slow too. So apparently at least somebody is listening. Kevin, thanks for asking a question. Does it surprise you that my email to The Guardian about censorship of their methane article has been ignored? I'm not at all surprised. And apparently, the Facebook has recently hired Scott Johnson as a fact checker. Scott Johnson was among the first people to libel me and then later to slander me. And he denies abrupt climate change. So I'm not surprised at all that he's fact checking for Facebook. Maybe he works for The Guardian now too, and fact checks for them, where the facts don't matter.
He's saying their pieces are wrong.
Yeah, of course Scott Johnson is saying The Guardian is wrong because they go too far, when in fact they don't go far enough. Welcome Dushko B as a climate defender. So again, I would like to return to the topic that I've talked about a little bit before, that we have conversed about before in these live streams. How do we accept adversity and ambiguity as adventure? How do we seek the balance between loving our fates and also pursuing justice? How do we find our own purpose in life, our purpose in the world? How do we find meaning in our life? I think all of these are related. Thank you, Alex, for pointing out that you can hear me, but there's no picture. That probably works out perfectly well for everybody watching. I have a great face for radio. 72 degrees in Nebraska in November, matching what's going on in the Arctic, apparently, where above the Arctic Circle, it was more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit within the last week. Phil Griffin, thanks for joining the channel as a climate defender. Oh, James John, I need to point out that the paper that I thought was retracted was indeed not retracted. I went to the... Okay, two things happened. First, the Times of London reported that the paper had been removed. And so I went to the original link thinking I would find it there. And that link took me to a December 2019 much earlier draft of the paper. So I thought the paper had been retracted, but in fact, it had just changed URLs. So I found the other link later. How did I find it? Because when I went on YouTube and announced that this paper had been retracted, 3 of the comments in the comment box within a few hours indicated it's not been retracted. Here it's here at this link. So sure enough, I clicked the link and found it. I posted a mea culpa. That was the name of the very short essay I posted at guymcpherson.com that includes that new link to the paper. So it's not been retracted. You can find it there. Go to guymcpherson.com and click on the mea culpa, and there will be a link directly to that paper. So my apologies for not being able to find it in the first place. Dushko, thanks for upgrading your membership already. You just joined 5 minutes ago, and already you're updating your membership. Thank you for that. Suzanne asks, have you read the recent paper about if we stop emitting CO2, the oceans will also stop absorbing it? Isn't it similar to how the aerosol masking effect will work as well? Damned if we do. I have not read that article. And that's fascinating, and it makes perfect sense. Sort of like going into an El Nino Southern Oscillation in which the oceans release a bunch of carbon dioxide and also a bunch of heat. Yes, Don Hawkins, I couldn't agree more. To know that one is a miracle of the known universe is a good start. One must remember. Yes, it's great to keep track of the fact that our knowledge of DNA and our knowledge of what comprises the universe allow us to comfortably say, I would say miraculously say, that the odds against any one of us being here in physical form exceed the odds against plucking a single atom from the entire universe. So that's pretty long odds that we would get to appear here on this most beautiful of planets for any length of time at all. And I suspect most of the people watching or maybe just listening because the video isn't so great, I suspect most of the people involved in this conversation in some form are old enough to appreciate the fact that we are here against very long odds, exceedingly long odds. And so when I think about that, and I imagine my early demise, and I have a sprained ankle, and my back hurts, and all those things that we tend to focus on in our daily lives, I try to remember the odds against me being here at all, much less to enjoy this enormous privilege that allows me to work with the woman behind the camera, to put out these videos, to have these conversations across the miles with, or to use more appropriate international speak, across the kilometers, to have these conversations at this time in history. It appears we're nearing the end of our history, but it's amazing that we get to be here at all. So I try to keep that in mind. Thank you for your generous donation, The Natural Progressive. Apparently the audio is better than it was at the beginning, apparently because I'm swallowing the microphone. The Canadian Prepper says COVID-19 will spread worse in high-rise apartment buildings. Do you agree? I don't know why that would be. Did the Canadian Prepper who interviewed me a couple or 3 years ago, did he indicate why that would be the case? I can't understand why that would happen. But maybe it makes perfect sense. Thank you, Robert Hayes, for joining as a climate defender. Scott Andrews, can you explain how we got from the 6th mass extinction to the 8th? Were 2 prior events recently discovered or just reclassified? They're recently discovered. And I have put links to peer-reviewed journal articles indicating when they were discovered. And they were both discovered, I think, and reported in the peer-reviewed literature, I think in 2019, beginning and at the end of 2019. I'm not positive of that. You can go to the search box at guymcpherson.com and type in the 8th and spell out 8th, and I think it'll take you to an essay that's called At Least the 8th from a few months ago, and that will lead to both of those relatively recently discovered mass extinction events. Thank you, Robert Hayes, for joining as a climate defender. And thanks for the explanation. The COVID-19 is worse in high-rise apartment buildings than in other areas because of the high density of the human population. Okay, well, that makes sense. And I suppose everybody who's working above the first floor or living above the first floor is using the elevators, and you pack too many people in an elevator, like more than one, and you have the potential for transmission of the virus with every single one, with every single trip in the elevator. The US dollar is trash. Not so fast. For years, I've been going to stores and paying with fiat currency, and I hand it to them. And the cashier almost always says, "How would you like to pay for that?" And I hand him cash, and I say, "Do you still take these?" Because I'm surprised that the value of the United States currencies has held together as long as it has. And when I say United States currency, I mean the currency issued by the Federal Reserve Bank, a private bank, contrary to the Constitution. It was John Kennedy, nearly as I know, who last pointed out that the Constitution, the last president to point out, that the United States Constitution calls for the United States Treasury, the United States government, to print money and nobody else. And John F. Kennedy only mentioned that just a few times. Rumor has it that he had the Treasury Department printing money at the time he was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. So that wouldn't surprise me if that's what happened. Suzanne asks, I read somewhere today, we surpassed the 1750 baseline by 2 degrees in March. Is that correct? According to Sam Carana, that is correct. According to Dr. Ye Tao, with whom I spoke, or rather with whom I wrote email messages, within the last week. It's closer to 1.85 degrees Celsius. And do I think that will lead to an exponential increase to 3 degrees and 4 degrees? Well, according to the United Nations Advisory Group on Greenhouse Gases, in their report in October of 1990, 1 degree C will trigger those self-reinforcing feedback loops and have dramatic impacts, negative impacts on ecosystem function. And climate speaker and writer David Spratt indicated in 2014, I think October, but I'm not sure. You can find this at the long essay, the Climate Change Summary and Update, at guymcpherson.com. And I think his name's David Spratt. And he pointed out that we actually triggered those self-reinforcing feedback loops at about a half a degree Celsius above the 1750 baseline. So I don't think that we will see profound increases in the exponential increase to 3 and 4 degrees. I think that's already underway. I stopped updating that climate change summary and update in 2016. Just today, I heard from somebody in Poland who pointed out to me that they've been keeping track on their blog and have added more. I stopped at, I think it was 69 self-reinforcing feedback loops with that essay when I stopped. I think it was August 2nd, 2016. Plus or minus a few days. And this person I've never met pointed out that he or she, I can't tell because I don't know what Polish names are representing what sexes, indicated that they had been keeping track and they were up to 102 self-reinforcing feedback loops. And I read through their essay, and that looked about right to me. So in any event, we've already triggered self-reinforcing feedback loops in large numbers, whether we call it 60 or 70 or 80 or 100. Really, we're just splitting hairs, aren't we? We've triggered a lot. And we are already experiencing exponential heating of the planet. So that's a bummer. Thank you, Trish Kaiser, for the very generous donation. Rocky Road Sunday and a beer for beautiful Pauline. Yes, half of that is a good idea.
Thank you.
The half that has me eating ice cream is a good idea. Osama asks, why bother dumbing down the predictive models? I'm referring to the Eskimo climate model. We need the best science, not the popular science. Well, models are very challenging to... Every model is wrong because it's a simplification. And the more complicated you make the model, the more correct it might be. But that was not the point of the paper. The paper to which you refer, published in Scientific Reports online on the 12th of November 2020, the Eskimo model. Simple though it was, the model indicated self-sustained melting of permafrost, even if we halt emissions today. So even if we stop emitting greenhouse gases today, we're still stuck on a very high level of greenhouse gas emissions, and the permafrost melting has already begun. They pointed out 2 other self-reinforcing feedback loops as well that we have triggered. So 3 altogether. Far fewer, obviously, than the 69 I accumulated or the 102 that this Polish person has put together. So, screwed either way. Raza, what percentage of solar systems contain some form of life in your opinion? Wow. You're asking for an opinion about something I know essentially nothing. I have no doubt that somewhere in the cosmos there is abundant life. In fact, upon reading Many Worlds in One by, I can't remember his name because I read it many years ago, I became convinced based on the arguments that he put together, the author put together in Many Worlds in One, that there is probably an infinite number of planets very similar to this one. In fact, he convincingly makes the case that there are an infinite number of Guy McPhersons saying these exact words on an infinite number of planets, and an infinite number of Paulines behind the camera, and an infinite number of Osamas and Razas commenting. So at some point, I think it's reasonable to expect that there's an infinite number, or at least a very large number, of conversations like this one being carried out. But we don't have to look very far just to the Fermi paradox, in fact, stated by Enrico Fermi in 1950, to come up with a reasonable explanation why we will never meet those people or organisms on those other planets. So I think there's probably in the cosmos a whole bunch of solar systems that contain life, and none of those will have any significant effect on us, nor us on them. Don asks, Guy, will you take a vaccine? Not right now, thank you. It depends. It depends upon the nature of the beast, as it were. We don't have any details yet. Yes, there have been 2 vaccines reported within the last week or week and a half. One from Moderna that apparently has an approximately 95% efficacy, and the previous one by Pfizer that has about a 90% efficacy. What are the side effects? What are the nature of the side effects, and how frequently do they occur in trials? There's a lot we don't know yet. So until I have some of those questions answered, I will be reluctant to take a vaccine. I've been exposed to and undoubtedly was infected with at least one of the at least 30 strains that we know about. And I was mildly symptomatic for a few days. On the other hand, Pauline was exceptionally symptomatic, including loss of smell and loss of taste. She was symptomatic for a month and had a pretty miserable time of it. So, would I accept a vaccine? Not today. At some point, perhaps. I mean, I've been vaccinated when I was a kid, not knowing any better, not knowing any worse. And I think there are some vaccines that are worth it. And my parents thought so as well. So should we be giving week-old babies dozens of vaccines? No, I don't think that's a good idea. And so I will be reluctant, but I'm not sure of my answer to that question yet. If the Polish name ends in an A, then it's a woman. Well, that's interesting, and I didn't know that. And I can't remember this person's name who sent me the email message just today. I can look. Nope. Marcin. Marcin. So, what do you think about that? I don't have a clue. Okay. Loey writes, your message is becoming more mainstream every day. Soon the conventional media will be all over you. Like stink on shit comes to mind. Will you be doing interviews with, for example, newspapers? Yeah, sure. You know, it says right on my interviews page, the recent interviews, that I will submit to interviews with almost anybody. I have a list of a few people I won't, because there's a few people who have not treated me very nicely. And so I'm not going back to that well. But for the most part, I would love people to know, to be reminded that they're going to die. And so is everybody else, that we were in the midst of a mass extinction event, and the last mass extinction event that we know about at this point that was in any way similar to this one had no organisms larger than a shrew surviving, and a very large majority of the species disappearing from the planet. So I want people to know. I think that it is scientific malpractice to withhold that information from people, as so many so-called scientists are doing at this point. So I think that's terrible, what's generally going on, what generally passes for science in the society. Do I find Dmitry Orlov's 5 stages of collapse usefully predictive of our collapsing future? I used to follow Orlov quite closely, and I think it's on his blog. I think it's October 30th. I think it's 2012. But the last time I read that essay of his was probably within a week of October 30th, 2012, or whenever it came out. But I think it was that essay when he says there's no longer 5 stages of collapse. There's 2, and we're done with 1. So I think his early work was really quite good in pointing out the parallels between the collapse of the Soviet Union and the ongoing demise of the United States, the last remaining hyperpower. And I don't follow his work anymore, but I think that we are closer to the edge of the decline of American empire and industrial civilization than most people are willing to admit. So I think Orlov got it right quite a long time ago. I haven't followed him lately. Dushko, I do enhance my own immune system with things like zinc, vitamins A, C, and D, and good sleep, and as low of stress as I can create in my life. And maybe, depending upon the efficacy of the vaccine and the absurdity of the general population that surrounds me, maybe I'll take a vaccine anyway. I haven't decided yet. I don't think we're in a position to make that decision as individuals. Maybe you already have. I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do. But on the other hand, if you're trying to tell me what to do, I think you're going to be very disappointed in my actions to follow. How do you prove efficacy in 7 months? I don't know. I'm not an epidemiologist. I haven't done research on vaccines, so I don't know the details. Yes, Raza, Eco Warrior, you certainly can have an invitation to the ceremony when I get the Nobel Prize. Absolutely. Because I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. So I can make that promise to everybody who's tuning in right now. You're all invited. Marcin is a man. Thank you for that. So apparently we've cleared that up, that the Polish person who has the blog with more than 100 self-reinforcing feedback loops is a man. Lots of species have done a lot better than we're going to end up doing unless we have a profound change in human behavior and a few more dozen miracles along the way. So yes, dragonflies, dinosaurs, lots of species did a lot better than us. I follow the email blasts that a medical doctor in Austin, Texas points out. He's a couple of 3 years older than me. So, and he's been practicing medicine is basically his entire life. So I trust most of what he says. And he says vitamin D, lots of vitamin D, is the recommendation he gives to everybody. So if you're interested in avoiding COVID disaster and you're interested in advice from a medical doctor who's been practicing medicine on the ground for his entire adult life, which is now more than 62 years of age for him, not that he's been practicing medicine, then vitamin D seems like the way to go. He recommends 5,000 IUs per day, which is a lot. Sorry, my audio level dropped. I'm trying to swallow the microphone here. What do I think about the price of Bitcoin skyrocketing? I really couldn't care less about any of those cryptocurrencies. I think the people who are buying the cryptocurrencies and causing their prices to skyrocket are tuned into the fact that the US dollar as the reserve currency for the world is headed south. But I think they're not paying attention to the fact that we're in the midst of a mass extinction event, that we're in the midst of abrupt climate change, that we're in the midst of a pandemic, and so on. And maybe worrying about digits on a screen isn't the most important thing in our lives. Do I think, Suzanne asks, there'll be a last-ditch effort that most likely will not work, but are extreme in nature, such as nuclear winters, etc., before the planet is destroyed, or will business as usual continue until the end? Yeah, that's a fine question. A lot of people have really strong opinions about this. And I'm not one of them. I think we might try nuclear winter by bombing somebody for something, because that's the American way. We might. I wouldn't bet my life on it either way. I think our time is short regardless. And any attempt at large-scale nuclear disaster is going to end in disaster for all of us. I think that the people who actually make those decisions probably know about the potential for Earth's atmosphere to be stripped away by large-scale nuclear detonation or release of materials. So probably that means they wouldn't go that route. But how do I know? If I were pulling the strings of empire, the empire would be acting very differently. I can assure you that. But I'm not. I agree, Kevin, that Orlov certainly lacks credibility. He thinks there's no such thing as abrupt climate change, for example, and he actually did a pretty significant hit piece or two on me after I met him at the Age of Limits conference in 2013, May of 2013. So he wasn't very nice to me. And yes, he certainly is trying to sell books. And yes, don't forget to hydrate. Hydrating, good. Hydrating, aspirin, vitamin D, good. Active sex life, very good. Oh, wait, we're talking about avoiding symptoms. Some of you people are very funny. I've seen a dragonfly, but never an elephant fly. Yeah, me neither.
That's from Dumbo, the movie.
Have you ever seen a horsefly? No. Have you ever seen a dragonfly? I've seen a dragonfly, but I've never seen an elephant fly.
That's from what?
Dumbo.
Dumbo, the movie. Was that a Disney thing?
Yeah.
Was that animated?
Yes. It's
Okay, I've never seen it.
so
So apparently there's a movie called Dumbo about an elephant. Then that's where the dragonfly, elephant fly thing comes from. Whatever. Anyway, yes, there's no question that the vaccine would be big business for a relatively few people. That's the way the system's been working my entire life, and probably at least the last 200 years. It shouldn't come as a big surprise, and I've actually written about this for the peer-reviewed literature, that people in positions to do so, generally wealthy people, will take advantage of every opportunity to make more money. And where are they going to make that money? From people like you and me. That doesn't mean they're creating the situation. Nobody created this pandemic so that they could make money. That's just ridiculous. The potential for losing aerosol masking sufficiently to cause the extinction of all life on Earth is not something that even the, quote, powers that be are interested in having happen. Trust me on this one. They don't want to die either, and certainly they don't want to accelerate the ongoing extinction event. They're knowledgeable. They're not going to go that route. Pauline's typing stuff like Dumbo was a great film. Well, I'm claiming to have no knowledge of Dumbo whatsoever, except for
Raza knows.
Raza knows. Raza knows is a great film. Whatever. Whew. Thank you for joining, Scott Mears. Thank you for joining this channel as a member. Gaio, I think that's not true. I don't think Trump starred in Dumbo. But maybe I never saw the movie. What do I know? All right. An announcement to make soon. Well, maybe soon. In the not too distant future, we're going to make another video to replace the inaugural video for the science updates. That science update, I just completely screwed up. And in fact, the paper was published that I said was retracted, and it was not retracted. I followed the Times of London a little too close on that one. We will be doing a video that will focus on this headline from phys.org. That's P-H-Y-S, as phys as in physiology, phys.org. Here's the headline: Climate change bigger threat than COVID, Red Cross. Yes, Red Cross actually is admitting that climate change is a bigger deal than COVID. And there's a great line from the Secretary General of Red Cross. Quote, "Unfortunately, there is no vaccine for climate change." That's perfect. I love that. So, relatively soon, we'll have the first science update again, round 2. Yes, I agree, Kevin. If nuclear weapons are used, for example, on North Korea or Iran, it will be to cool the planet. Absolutely. And it's difficult to imagine that the people who have the ability to pull those strings, to launch those bombs, are ignorant enough to do so. But I suppose I shouldn't be surprised at the ignorance that has already occurred over the course of the last couple hundred years. So I've been a big part of it, for that matter. We were all born ignorant. Some of us stay that way for a long time. Oh, that's interesting. James, 7,000 IUs of vitamin D every morning, still got COVID in March. No joke, but went away with no side effects. So that's bad news followed by good news. And I suspect that, at least for most people, vitamin D is a good idea, whether it wards off the virus or not, actually. I think it's one of those cases where you do no harm by taking relatively large quantities of vitamin D. Did I happen to read more on the climatetippingpoints.info website? It's disinformation? No, I did not. And are you surprised there's disinformation? I'm certainly not. Who was it? The father of the anchors back when there was network news. Arizona State University has a department or a college of journalism named after him. Burroughs. Edward R. Murrow. Sorry. Edward Murrow said, if you don't watch the news, you're uninformed. If you watch the news, you're misinformed. And he saw what was happening then, and it was clear that there was disinformation going on then. This is in the 50s and 60s, as I recall. I don't believe I ever watched Edward R. Murrow on the news, but that indicates that he was a little before my time. Suzanne, forget the Nobel Prize. Really? That fast? We're going to forget the Nobel Prize in 15 minutes? Whew. Some fans you turn out to be. Can I come sleep on your couch when the end occurs? You can come sleep on the couch now. I'm not sure that'll cause the end. And the end is pretty difficult to predict. So you might want to start headed this direction soon. And Pauline might have something to say about masking up and so on. Can you cook? This might come into play as well. Should interview Dr. Ruth. Is she still alive? I have no idea. I have no idea who you're even talking about.
Dr. Ruth Westheimer.
Pauline says that's Dr. Ruth Westheimer.
Sexual life is very important.
Oh, she's a sex doctor.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see.
Maybe we aren't going to interview her.
She's still alive. She's 92.
She's 92 years old.
Because she had a lot of sex.
Right. She had a wonderful sex life. She's going to live forever. She's going to outlive all of us. The ongoing mass extinction event will miss Dr. Ruth. So there you have it. Straight from somebody's personal experience.
Here's a great line from Dr. Ruth.
Nobody has any business being naked in bed if they haven't decided to have sex.
Dr. Ruth says, nobody has any business being naked in bed if they haven't decided to have sex. Right? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Okay. Jimmy John says, have you tried to get Peter Wadhams, Natalia Shakova, or Igor Semeletov on NBL? I tried repeatedly with Shakova. No response. Have not tried with the other two. I don't think.
Peter Wadhams you tried.
Tried Peter Wadhams?
Yeah. You also tried to get him to write a thing for your book.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Apparently, I did ask Peter Wadhams. It's a good thing my memory is just right across the desk. So that's very convenient. And I also asked him to write an endorsement for my book, Only Love Remains, Dancing at the Edge of Extinction. And I sent him the electronic version of the book. He agreed to write an endorsement for it. And then he read it. And he says, I can't write an endorsement for this. It's just a little dark for me, or something like that. He didn't think we should be promulgating that message. So he retracted the offer to write an endorsement for it. Children are having climate anxiety. That's because they're actually knowledgeable. They're not willfully ignorant like the adults are. What do you think about it? How should adults explain this problem to children? It's really interesting. When I went on speaking tours, I, of course, stayed in the homes of a lot of people who had children of widely varying ages. And I remember a few people who would tell their child under the age of 10 about what's going on, about how they're not going to live forever and their lives probably will be short. And the child would typically cry for about 3 minutes and then get up and start chasing the dog or the cat or start playing again. So that was really interesting. I have no children, so I don't know anything about the development of small people. And so I'm really not in a position to answer that question. I think it's important to tell the truth. And some people think it's important to tell their children that there says Santa Claus and an Easter bunny. Now, at some point, as the child ages, it becomes okay, according to society, to tell them that I lied all those years about Santa Claus and the Easter bunny. So I don't know how to balance those things. This is one of the advantages of not being a parent, is that I don't have to worry about at what point I stop lying to somebody. So I don't know how to explain this problem to children. I suspect it depends upon the emotional development of the child. their age and other factors, because not all 12-year-olds are alike, obviously. Most people, by the time they're 12, understand that they are going to die, that as an individual, their life will end. And so it's a lot different to tell somebody when they're 14 years old that we're in the midst of a mass extinction event, that we're in the midst of abrupt climate change. It's a lot different to tell somebody that at the age of 14 than it is to tell somebody at the age of 8. I'm pretty sure it's a big difference based on the development of children, but really I don't know much about it. I think we should tell the truth. And do we maybe have to moderate that truth or mediate the truth with additional information depending upon the age of the child? Sure. I think that's perfectly reasonable, but I don't think lying is ever a very good idea. Thank you, DVLoth49, for joining this channel as a member. John asks, do I think ignoring the rules is a manifestation of subconscious awareness of impending extinction? I need additional information. I don't know what rules are being ignored or what rules you're referring to. If you're referring to, for example, the unwillingness of people to adhere to social distancing and wear masks, no. I don't think that's